Good morning, folks. If you're just joining us, thank you for joining us this morning. We will give others a couple more minutes to join us as well, and we're going to start our morning scoop at 8:01 in the morning. Again, folks, good morning. If you're just joining us, thank you for your time. We will start at 8:01 in the morning. Let's give others a couple more minutes to join us. Good morning, folks. We are going to start in just a couple seconds here, just to give others a little bit more time to join us as well. All right, I think we are going to start. Good morning again. My name is Luigi Del Puerto, and I'm the associate publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. I will be moderating today's morning scoop on Proposition 208, which, if approved by voters this November, would add a 3.5% income tax surcharge on taxable incomes over $250,000 for single filers and over $500,000 for joint filers. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are also live streaming today's discussion on the Arizona Capital Times Facebook page. So please direct friends or associates to our Facebook page if for some reason they are unable to join us via Zoom. Staffers are on hand to take in questions both via Zoom and via our Facebook page. So do send in your questions and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can toward the end of the program. Please keep your comments on both our Zoom chat room and Q&A room and also on our Facebook page, civil and respectful. At this point, I want to thank the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flynn Foundation for sponsoring today's morning scoop. The nonpartisan Arizona Center for Civic Leadership is committed to enhancing civic life in Arizona through civic education, leadership, and engagement programs. The Arizona Civic Exchange, or Civex, creates opportunities for members of the public to become better informed and educated on political and policy topics affecting their communities. The center fosters civic leaders in Arizona through the prestigious Flynn Brown Fellowship to build the knowledge, skills, and a robust network to find solutions for Arizona's long-term issues. The center promotes civic engagement through the Civic Leadership Collaborative by convening Arizona's leadership development organizations to advance the goal of building strong leaders in every community in our state. And here to welcome us this morning is Don Wallace, who is the Vice President of the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership, Flynn Foundation. Don oversees the foundation's statewide civic leadership program that prepares emerging and established leaders to enter all levels of public service. Don is also a public policy expert who has advised governors and guided policy development in the Arizona legislature for the last 2 decades. Don?
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Luigi and the Arizona Capitol Times for making this a can't miss event. For me especially, it's exciting, though not surprising, to see such a broad interest in a conversation about Proposition 208. The record-breaking attendance of this webinar proves what we have always known, that the quality of education in our state and the funding of our public schools is top of mind for most Arizona voters. At the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership, we're largely known for the Flynn Brown Fellowship, which helps emerging and experienced leaders expand their knowledge, skills, and networks to address our state's long-term issues. On today's panel are 2 distinguished fellows, Representative Joanne Osborne and Superintendent Risha Vanderway. While we are immensely proud of the 386 fellows who have participated in the Flynn Brown program over the last 10 years, we are also keenly aware that civic leadership is best matched with an informed and participatory electorate. To that end, we sponsor events like today's morning scoop through the Center's Civic Education Initiative, which is Civex, provides opportunities to the public to educate themselves and engage on tough public policy issues, including those ideas that are ultimately decided at the ballot box. Our work is built on the belief that our state will be stronger with more Arizonans engaged more often and more deeply in our shared civic life, from informed voting to issue advocacy, to running for office, or to careers in public service. At the center, we believe that the exchange of many perspectives, particularly in the discussion of complex public policy issues, is a core value. The Flynn Brown way is an expectation for respect, civility, and the development of relationships with those holding different ideologies. We intentionally seek out individuals with opposite viewpoints and ideas to prove that fruitful and civil discourse can be achieved in modern society. We remain committed to our original vision to educate, inspire action, and build new generations of civic leaders. And through the work we do, and through all of the good work our partners and colleagues do, the center is pursuing the mission of the Flynn Foundation to improve the quality of life in Arizona to benefit future generations. Thank you for being a part of our mission here today. We hope to see many of you back here next week when we return for a discussion of another important item on November's ballot, Proposition 207. Thank you again, Luigi.
Thank you, Don. And thanks for everything that you've done. And thank you for sponsoring this discussion this morning. We have a great panel this morning. Joining us is David Lujan, who is the director of the Arizona Center for Economic Progress, one of the organizations behind Prop 208. Mr. Lujan represents the Yes campaign. He's a former member of the State Senate and House of Representatives. He has served as an assistant attorney general advising the School Facilities Board and as legal counsel for the Arizona Senate. He also served as chief administrator for ASU's Preparatory Academy in Phoenix, which is a public charter school for preschool through 12th grade students. David, thank you for joining us. I think, David, you're muted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also joining us this morning is former Arizona Superintendent of Public Instruction, Jaime Molera. Jaime represents the No campaign. He's co-founder and partner of Molera Alvarez. He served as Arizona State Board of Education president for 2 terms and was a lead advisor on policy and legislative affairs to Governor Jane D. Hall. He also served as senior consultant and spokesperson for U.S. Senator John Kyle. He sits on the board of directors for the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he chairs the Greater Phoenix Chamber's Public Affairs Committee. Jaime, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Also on the panel is Dr. Risha Vanderway, who is the superintendent of Tuba City Unified School District. Prior to joining TCUSD, Dr. Vanderway served as Coconino County School Superintendent for 5 years. And previously, she served as principal at Lakeview Primary School in Page. Dr. Vanderway is also a Flynn Brown Fellow. Risha, thank you for joining us.
Hi there, thank you for having me.
And finally, we have Representative Joanne Osborne, a first-term legislator who represents Legislative District 13 in the Arizona House of Representatives. She served on the Goodyear City Council for almost a dozen years and was vice mayor for 2 years. Prior to joining the Goodyear City Council, she served for 6 years as a member of the Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission. She is a small business owner, and if I'm not mistaken, the only retailer in the Arizona legislature. She is also a Flynn Brown Fellow. Representative Osborne, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's an honor to be with you all. Thank you.
Proposition 208 will impose a surcharge, tax surcharge of 3.5% on Arizona's highest income earners. If approved by voters, the revenue from Prop 208 will be distributed as follows: 50% for hiring and raises for teachers and classroom support personnel, 25% for hiring and raises for student support services personnel, 10% for new teacher retention programs, 12% to the Career Training and Workforce Fund, and 3% to the Arizona Teachers Academy. My first question is to David. David, how did proponents of Prop 208 decide to structure this tax as a 3.5% surcharge? Why 3.5% and not another number? As a follow-up question, what's the rationale behind the $250,000 and $500,000 thresholds? And to those who would argue that these are arbitrary numbers, what is your response?
Yeah, thank you, Luigi. So first of all, we came up with Proposition 208 because for the last decade, no state in the country has cut more funding from its public education system than Arizona. And many of those cuts have never been restored. And we're feeling the impacts of that in the form of one of the worst teacher shortage crises in the country and some of the largest class sizes. So the funding buckets were developed in consultation with the people who are impacted the most, teachers. And we've developed a solution that's going to come up with addressing our education funding crisis, addressing our teacher shortage crisis. And so we developed it so that the money is going to get to the areas that need it the most, that have been so severely impacted by the cuts over the years. In terms of the 3.5% surcharge, we looked at a lot of different revenue options over the last couple of years in terms of, what's the best way to raise revenue to get to our classrooms. And so the surcharge we looked at is part of the reason we're in the funding crisis that we're in today, is because our state legislature has cut taxes every single year but one since 1990. And many of those tax cuts have not gone to everyday Arizonans. In fact, many of them have gone to corporations and the wealthiest 1%. And it's made our tax code very unbalanced and unfair. So we created a revenue option that's going to make our tax code fair, and it's going to bring consistent, sustainable, voter-protected funds to our public education system.
Jaime, I want to get your reaction to what David said.
Well, first off, this notion that it's just a 3.5% surcharge, it's laughable. This is creating a top tier tax rate of 8%, which would be the 9th highest in the country if it's enacted. One of the things that I keep hearing from the proponents of this is that, it's just going to be effective on those rich people. Well, the fact of the matter is the way Arizona tax is structured, half of these payers will indeed be small businesses. And we have economic analysis to demonstrate that. That's why you have all of these business organizations from across the state, large and small, coming together and saying, if you're going to do something to support education, and which I guarantee you, there's not a group that I've worked with or for that doubts that. I think there needs to be a continuing effort to put money into our education system, just like we've done these last several years, which has been significant. The 123 proposition, which puts another $350 million in, has been very significant. Are we done yet? Absolutely not. I think there's issues of equity that have to be addressed. You have huge fluctuations in property values where you have some districts that can rely on that and other districts can't. There's a very complex structure that needs to be dealt with. Unfortunately, unlike what we did in Prop 301, which I was very proud of to help be the architect and then ultimately lead, we brought people together to work on it and come up with a structure that made sense. We brought businesses together and we brought education leaders together. Not one business was consulted, at least that I know of, or any of the major businesses that we were a part of were consulted as part of this proposition. So the fact of the matter is, Luigi, this is very damaging to Arizona's economy. It will be. When you have people like Jim Rounds and Elliot Pollock, noted economists, that say this is a very dangerous proposition. We understand that there needs to be investments in education, but don't do it by crippling a revenue source that would really help us deal with a lot of other problems that Arizona needs to deal with.
Thank you, Jaime. Before I pull in Dr. Vanderway and Representative Osborne, I want to ask David, you were shaking your head there for a couple seconds. Your response, sir.
Well, you know, as many people know, we tried to bring this effort in 2018 unsuccessfully. And I think the day after that the court struck down the 2018 measure, we actually held a press conference and said, we're going to be back in 2020 if the legislature or somebody else doesn't bring forward a plan to address the funding crisis in our schools. We made no secret about that. And we talked to a lot of business groups over the last couple of years. So you're going to hear a lot of the sky is falling and doomsday scenarios about what's going to happen from our opposition. But the fact is that our opposition had 2 years plus all the time before that to bring forward a solution, and they didn't. And so that's why the people of Arizona are tired of waiting for the politicians at the state capitol and others to bring forward a plan. And so that's what Proposition 208 does.
Representative Osborne, ma'am, I want to ask you, David mentioned that the legislature has had 2 years since they, from 2018, when they first started trying to put this measure on the ballot. Let me back up a bit. I guess my question to you is that everybody agrees with, it seems to me, that our schools are underfunded. How would you define underfunded? And if the proponents of Prop 208 are asking for $1 billion, from your perspective as a legislator, how much are you willing to provide to schools? And again, just the question, what would you consider, how would you define underfunded?
Well, thank you for that question. And I will tell you, in 2017, when I made the decision to run for the legislature, one of the main topics was education. And I did feel that we were underfunded, and I was not happy with teachers' pay. That was me personally, amongst other reasons as to why I wanted to run. Now, I think that great strides have come forward. And in fact, I can tell you, 15 million went to the Teachers Academy. There are many pots of money that has been going forward to try to get rid of this underfunded concept. And into some legislators, even this past year, we were bringing the additional assistance back up to date. And so there are areas where people will say we are not underfunded, but there are areas that we do need more funding. And that's in new schools. That's in repairs and capital projects. That's in the 4th year, 9th grade for CTE. I believe in full day kindergarten. So there are some things that I agree are still not where we want them to be. And then there's areas of our state, and I'm sure Risha will have a lot to say about that when you have some rural areas that need help. So, it's this balance of what's truly underfunded and needs more. There's also the argument for special education. So we can have those conversations, but to say the legislature is not doing anything to fund education to try to bring us back to where we should be is completely false.
To those, ma'am, who would say that if you look at the per pupil funding that's coming from the state, and if you compared what we have for the latest budget and the per pupil funding a decade ago, we're still not funding it at the level that we were just before the recession hit.
That's to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a follow-up question to you.
I was not on the legislature a decade ago. I am today. And in January, I want to say it was, we had to vote to surpass our constitutional limit for education payment. And I believe that's taking us to 11,000 per pupils. And we're on the right track, you know, and I wish people would realize that because I was right there with you and not in agreement and embarrassed as a state as where we were for funding. But I'm also very optimistic and hopeful of the way that we're going forward, because our children deserve the greatest education and brightest of futures. And it's how we all get there, and holding our economy steadfast at the same time. It's a balance of what we do here.
Dr. Vanderway, ma'am, I want to ask you, if Proposition 28 is approved by voters this November, I guess the question to you is, how will it immediately affect your schools, and how will it immediately help your schools?
Prop 208 will focus on supporting us and retaining our teachers, providing higher wages for our teachers, higher wages for our counselors, our nurses, bus drivers, interventionists, support staff. Rural Arizona has a high population of kids in poverty. We have a large geographic area that we encompass. We have buses that travel for hours and hours to pick up kids. This being said, we train our bus drivers and then they leave and they go elsewhere for higher pay. We have positions open for nurses that aren't filled all year long. And we have students that have severe and profound medical needs. So for me, with our turnover rate for teachers in rural Arizona is about 25%. When I was a principal at Lakeview and Page, it was about 25% a year. So you have young teachers coming in that have never really been in rural Arizona. They don't understand the population of kids, whether we have Hispanic kids, Native American kids, or even Anglo kids that are, suffer from poverty. So the mentorship programs will be hugely needed. Our kids, the interesting thing about rural Arizona is we serve a population of kids that are generally higher poverty. And with higher poverty comes different needs. What those needs encompass are academic needs, which is, reading, writing, math, arithmetic, but it's also socio-emotional needs and medical needs. And so the schools generally are the hub to take care of that. But currently we have been dealing with so much turnover, large classrooms, where it's hard to even pitch people to come and apply for jobs. I mean, I might have 10 jobs open and receive 5 applicants. And, we have great support services, but they're not adequately trained either. And these funding streams will help support higher salaries for all of the positions that I mentioned, which may, encourage people to apply for our positions. But it also helps support the people who are here. During coronavirus right now, like our district, for example, we're 100% distant learning. My teachers, my administrators are doing an amazing job trying to support the community, the children, the parents that we serve. However, that being said, we have an infrastructure issue. We have teachers who do not know how to teach online, and they're learning fast, but we need the supports in order to not only get our teachers where they need to go, but to get our kids back. So there's a lot of fast wins for us in rural Arizona.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to go to Jaime. Sir, in a campaign ad from the No campaign, you say that you support public education, but that Prop 208 is the wrong way to do it. My question to you is, what is the right way to do it? If not a tax hike on Arizona's top income.
Luigi, let's look
ahead,
at the numbers. Over the last 2-3 years, on a yearly basis, if you combine what the legislature's put into new education funding, not the funding that was part of the formula or student growth or just inflationary costs, but additional dollars. When you combine that with Prop 123, it's exceeded the amount of money that will be put into this particular campaign. If you add up how much money would be put in, this will be about 7.3% increase. And it's about 6% if you add all the funds, federal funds also. So that's a significant increase, no doubt, but is that going to solve all the problems that has been articulated here today or is being touted by the proponents? No, it won't. But you are creating a structure that could have devastating impacts on Arizona's economy. You know, it's been purported that business groups are coming together, that the sky is falling. But I asked the question, you know, Arizona doesn't have a monolithic business community structure. You have organizations like Greater Phoenix Leadership has been fighting for education funding for a long time. They don't agree with the Goldwater Institute on many issues. But on this issue, you have a myriad of organizations, chambers of commerce, large and small, the United Dairymen, the Southern Arizona Home Builders, the groups that the Cattlemen Association, groups that are saying, wait a minute, time out. Arizona's economy has been thriving because we've been able to diversify, bring in small business growth, have a lot of capital investments. Everything that we're hearing from economists to business organizations are saying this is not a sensible approach to what we're doing. Alia Pollock at the economic forecast for 2021, and Alia Pollock, as we know, is one of the most revered economists in Arizona, stated that this proposition is not a good approach and could significantly harm the state. Doing harm to Arizona's economic engine makes no sense.
So Jaime,
And that's what it comes down to.
Just to go back to my question, what for you would be the right way? And if it's not a tax hike
Luigi,
on top income earners, what kind of a tax hike would you impose to raise money for education?
Well, Luigi, my point was in that the last 3 years, there has been significant chunks put into the education system. Now, is that the be all end all? No, I keep saying that adding additional monies and addressing specific problems. For instance, for me, I think we need to do something for special education. You have wildly different abilities for school districts, and it goes back to that issue of property tax valuations. Districts that can rely on their property tax are able to deal better because they have the wherewithal to help their special ed students. A lot of school districts don't have that. So being able to be targeted, getting a good return on investment, investing in math and science teachers, I would say absolutely. That there should be a structure to how these dollars get used. But Luigi, you also cannot decimate the economy that's been allowing us to grow, allowing us to make those kinds of significant investments on a year-to-year basis. If that goes away, then we're just left with this proposition, which, by the way, the proponents won't mention that this is a proposition that'll keep given every single year, because unlike our state taxes and unlike our federal taxes, this is not pegged to inflation, right? So every single year, because inflation's a real thing, you'll have more businesses and more Arizonans fall into this tax rate, which I think is just ludicrous.
David, I want to get your reaction, sir.
Well, you never heard a solution there. And that's because to address our funding crisis in our
Keeping
school,
the economy going,
you've got to raise taxes in order to raise the revenue. And the fact is, it doesn't matter what sort of proposal we would have come up with. The opposition would have opposed it because that's what they've been doing for years and years. They don't want to increase revenue. They just want to keep the status quo. And our economy is already hurting by not investing in our public education system. How many businesses have already chosen not to come to Arizona? How many jobs have we already lost because of all of the disinvestments in our public education system over the years? Jaime was talking about, economists. You can talk to economists in Arizona and nationally, and they'll tell you one of the most important things states can do to invest in their economy, to invest in their workforce, is to invest in education. And that's what a number of our neighboring states have been doing. That's what a number of states around the country have been doing more than we have. And we've been falling further and further behind the national average. We're 48th in the country now in per pupil funding. And what blanket has that already thrown on our future economy? And so I think that Prop 208 is good for business, good for the economy. And it's not just me. I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of small business owners over the recent months, and they will tell you they are enthusiastically supporting Prop 208. They're saying these organizations, I don't know what they're talking about, because this surcharge, we don't make anywhere near the threshold of what you would have to pay under Prop 208. And so we have small business owners around the state that are recognizing that this is good for their businesses because it's going to put more money into the pockets of Arizonans.
Thank you, David. Jaime, I'm sorry, Dr. Vanderway, go ahead, ma'am.
Well, may I add one thing? One of the biggest growing schools in our state is high poverty, low performing. which means that many of our students are prepared to do low income jobs, such as working at McDonald's, such as working in hotels. When I was a county superintendent, my goal was to increase the percentage of kids that were graduated from high school into mid-wage and to high-wage jobs, because that is what our businesses were looking for. And currently, I mean, really the scope that we're dealing with is we are not investing in our education. We do need to fund all-day kindergarten. We do need to fund preschool. But the kids that we're producing right now are not adequately prepared to work in small businesses and or larger businesses. It's the data demonstrates that. And to me, in a state that has high poverty, it's not okay. We need to arm our kids and our families with education in order for our businesses to thrive.
Representative Osborne, I want to get your take, ma'am. You've heard from Jaime that this is the Prop 208 is the wrong way. You've heard from David, who said, in fact, this is good for the economy. I want to get your reaction.
Well, as a small business owner, I have an opinion and an understanding that we have almost pre-COVID 600,000 small businesses in Arizona, and 50% of them will be affected. So I will go to that discussion. But I will say that some of the things that have been mentioned that are very important, because I do believe education and economic prosperity go hand in hand. I do believe that, but not at this way of doing it with Prop 208, because we are harming the economy by doing this. As the former vice mayor of Goodyear, the city that the Arizona Chamber is going to be awarding this month as the most business-friendly city in our state, I have seen for over a decade how to be business-friendly, how to bring corporations to our city, working with GPEC, working with the Arizona Commerce Authority, working with all the different, Westmark, different business leaders around our state and our nation, site selectors, to figure out what's it going to take. And yes, education is a key issue that comes up many times. But it cannot be at the risk of our economy. The best thing that we can be doing, that we are doing, is showing a broad base of industries. We are not the Arizona of the 5 C's anymore. And actually you could call it 6, because the other C was construction. We are now manufacturing, technology, research and development, high paying jobs that help broaden that base of industries that make us have a strong economy so that things can ebb and flow. You think about what COVID's done to us, those jobs of restaurants, of services, of tourism, hoteliers, all those kinds of things. They are not out of the woods. We are not out of the woods yet.
And we will get to that. Right.
Yes.
And we will get to that conversation, ma'am. I do want to ask you the same question I asked Jaime, which is that if Prop 208 is the wrong way, 2 questions. What is the right way for you? And how much funding are you committed to give to our schools if that funding is decided by the Arizona legislature?
I can't come up with an actual dollar amount, but I can say this. I believe in coalitions. I believe in bringing people together. I believe that David and Jaime need to come together with the business community, with the economists, with teachers, with superintendents, with parents, and all of us come together, and legislators, and say, let's get this done. As a freshman, legislator, from what I'm understanding, we're basing all of these things on a 1940s financing model for our state for education. Come on, if we can get the drought contingency plan done, if we can build the CAP, if we can have a 1980s groundwater act, why can't we fix education? But it takes everybody at the table. You cannot have a coalition of only one-sidedness. It takes everybody to, and you know what? When everybody comes together and not everybody's happy, then we probably have a good product. And that's where we need to start.
I want to go to David. Sir, states, let me back up. So the GLBC, which is the state's budget research arm, predicts that Proposition 208 will bring in $827 million in new revenue. Your own estimate, and correct me if I'm wrong, puts them out at 940 million. But JLBC analysts said that revenues from high income taxpayers are volatile. They fluctuate from year to year, more so than individual income taxes in general. The analyst also noted that, for example, in tax year 2008, the total individual income tax liability decreased by 11%, but the decrease for taxpayers earning $500,000 or more was nearly 30%. The reverse of that is in tax year 2014, when total individual income tax grew by 12%, but for those who are higher income earners, the growth was 28%. How do you assure schools that the revenue that you're signing, 940 million, will be stable?
Yeah, well, first of all, our revenue estimate of 940 million, that was a revenue estimate that was conducted by the Arizona Department of Revenue last November, I believe. And I believe, and I think a lot of people believe, that this is going to give schools in Arizona the most certainty they've had in budgeting in more than 20 years. And the reason why is because the funding cannot be touched by the legislature. That is where all the volatility in school district budgeting has come from in the past, because the money that the school districts thought they could rely on, the formulas that are in our statutes, the legislature cuts it year after year. And I'll give you an example, is the district additional assistance funding. That has been basically not funded for much of the past decade. That's supposed to give school districts total around the state about $371 million. And this is the revenue they need for school supplies, curriculum, technology. It was not funded in 2015, not funded in 16, not funded in 17. The legislature started to give a little bit back. Some of the legislators call that new money, but what it was still a cut because they weren't fully funding district additional assistance. And I'll give just the year before last, we had $1 billion revenue surplus. You would think that year of all years, school districts could count on additional assistance be fully funded that year. Instead, the legislature only funded it at 135 million out of 370 million. They call that 135 million of new money. School districts, I think if you talk to them, will tell you that was a $235 million cut. And the legislature that same year, with that $1 billion revenue surplus, passed a $380 million tax cut. That's the uncertainty that's caused by school district budgets, is because the legislature keeps taking their money. And so Prop 208 is going to put money in an account that the legislature cannot touch. That's what's going to give school districts the certainty.
Jaime, I want to get your reaction, sir.
So Luigi, the last several years, we've seen a tremendous growth. This notion that David mentioned that we've lost jobs, I don't know anybody that's come out and said Arizona's been losing jobs over these last 3-4 years. We've been one of the highest growing states in the country. So the reason why we've been a high growth state is because we have competitive tax policies. We're not taxing ourselves into oblivion like New Jersey or Vermont or California. And we're seeing those organizations, particularly from California, coming into Arizona. And we've been able to deal with so many other issues because of that, because we have a robust education system. We have a robust economy, which is driving a robust education system. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that if this were to happen, you look at the revenues that would be coming into the state, we think it would be decimated because of this. Higher education, our community colleges and universities, Representative Osborne talked about early childhood education, the Medicaid system that needs to be funded properly, behavioral health, child protective services. There's a myriad of things that have to be dealt with in the budget. I believe the legislature has done a good job over these last few years in adding more money into K-12 education. That has to be the priority, but you can't ignore every other aspect of the budget. Creating a structure that, by all accounts, and again, I go back to why these business organizations are opposing this, is not because they oppose our K-12 system or want to do something bad for teachers. It's just the opposite. But they also see that when you put in place bad economic policies, as other states have done, it has the opposite effect. That's why we're so vehement that this cannot be put in place in Arizona.
Thank you, Jaime. Dr. Vanderway, I want to ask you, ma'am, if Proposition 208 passes, we're looking at between $827 million and $940 million every year in new money for schools. If you're adding $1 billion to K-12, to our schools, what is the assurance? Let me back up a bit, sorry. If we're adding that much amount, can we expect the schools that get the additional funding to raise their performance measures? And in your case, in your district, if you can concretely give us examples, if you will, of how this money will raise academic standards.
So within my school, you know, it's generally speaking, kids in rural Arizona. My kids, we're on the Navajo Nation. We are very rural. You know, we have kids that we bus in, and you know, the money helps to provide classes that are inflated. It allows us to reduce our class sizes. It allows us to increase supports for you know, our students, like our instructional aides, interventionists, which is a math or an English interventionist. Our students generally are behind academically. Research shows that if you use smaller teacher to student ratios and assess students appropriately, you can move them along adequately. With this as well, it's also the whole idea of having certified, highly qualified teachers in the classroom. Currently, I can say we have many positions open in our junior high. We have social studies classrooms that are being taught by very dedicated substitutes or emergency certified teachers, but they're not qualified. They're not highly qualified. We are a school district that's in school improvement. And what that means is, per Arizona Department of Education, we have to have highly qualified teachers for every one of our kids.
So when you say you're in a school, I'm sorry, ma'am, when you say you're in a school improvement plan, what does that mean exactly? If you, for example, what is your letter grade for the district?
The letter grade for the district is a C in our high school, and it's lower in our junior high. So we're not a excelling district, and so these funds help support all of our programming. And for me, the idea is, if we're looking to lower class sizes and increase programs for intervention and alternative academic supports, teach our parapros and our emergency certified teachers, give them better programs and support systems to adequately serve our students. The thing that I just want to add is, I understand the economic needs of our state. However, I can honestly say that our kids need us. I mean, if you watch our kids in our Zoom classes, and if you see the ecosystem in which our kids are in, and if you see our kids that walk through our doors, they deserve the right to a highly qualified free education process. And I don't believe right now we're adequately doing that for our kids.
Can the public, for example, expect your school district to raise the letter grade? Right now you're at C, so maybe what's the next letter grade? Is it B minus? B, yeah, all right, yeah. Can the public expect that? And I guess, you know, if you can speak on behalf of the other schools, can the public expect that you will raise academic standards if you get this additional $1 billion in revenue?
That's the goal. You know, we need to raise our letter grades, and with adequate funding, it better supports us in doing so. We have been so lean. All of our schools, public schools, have been so lean because we're not adequately funded. And I can tell you, you can walk into our supply room, our teachers are buying supplies. You know, we've just been underfunded for so long that adequately funding our schools will help us to, as I said, get teachers. You know, we need teachers, we need support staff, we need bus drivers. We can't fill those positions. We've had a nurse position open at our elementary school for forever. And it's not just my district, it's all over the state. So that's what we're looking to do, is just get qualified people within our classrooms in order to support the academic growth of our kids. Because if we have people who aren't qualified, we cannot move the measure for our kids to get the adequate instructional environment that they deserve.
Representative Osborne, I want to go to you, ma'am. You're a small business owner, and I think in my introduction, I said you're the only retailer in the state legislature. What is your business exactly? Can you give us just a very brief description of what it is?
Well, actually, November 1st, my husband and I will be celebrating our 30th year in business. We started when, I always give my age away. We started when we were very young. I had a 10-day-old baby and a 2-year-old, and we opened up our jewelry store in Maryville. And nobody thought we'd make it, but we did. Back then, it was a C Corp. I'm a C Corp. That's what, old school, that's what we were. 5 years ago, I was able to finally, my husband and I, fulfill our American dream, and we built our own building and bought our pad of land to build our jewelry store. And we have an LLC for that. So when I talk about the small businesses within our state, you know,
I want to ask you a quick question about that.
100,000. We know that not all of them are going to, half of that, when I say half of our small businesses probably do their income taxes that way. Now doesn't mean all of them are going to be in this category of 250,000 or 500,000. It's half of them that probably are going to file their income taxes that way. But people don't realize that a profit does not equal cash in hand. You don't, small business people, hey guys, you know, when you're talking to your CPA and you're saying, what do you mean I have a profit? I don't have this kind of money. We put our dollars back into equipment, back into inventory, into a building. God forbid we try to put some dollars away for a rainy day, for an emergency, or a pandemic. I mean, that's what business people are trying to do. We all care about education. But to harm our economy this is not the right way to do it. Besides, fundamentally, as Arizonans, we're all voting to make a segment of the population pay for this. That's fundamentally wrong.
So just to be clear, ma'am.
Competitiveness across the nation, our neighboring states will all have a lower income tax bracket than Arizona, except for, oh, by the way, California.
So I want to ask you a quick question about that. I want to ask you a quick question. On your jewelry store, you actually pay a business tax, right? So you're not filing via your individual income tax. So on your business, on your jewelry store, you're not affected by Proposition 208. Is that correct?
So I will have the low rate where my small business owner who's an LLC, which a friend of mine that I spoke to the other day, who used to be an engineer for Lockheed Martin, started his own small business, technology research, development. And when I talked to him about this, he has grown tremendously. We're so proud of him. And he said, oh my goodness, this is gonna affect me. You know, that's the difference of me being able to hire a college intern. That college intern that won't be hired might have been a college intern that wanted to get engaged.
So I want to go
buy an engagement ring, won't be coming to my store now. So, you know, that's how, back to an ecosystem, we are in this together.
I want to go to David. Sir, we're in the middle of a pandemic where tens of thousands of Arizonans are unemployed and many businesses have shut down or are temporarily closed, and they're not quite sure if they're able to reopen. My question to you is that, is this the right time to raise the tax or impose a surcharge on Arizona's higher income earners?
Well, first of all, so keep in mind, this is only changing the individual income tax. So when people talk about struggling small businesses and businesses that are trying to make it, keep their doors open during the middle of this pandemic, in order to be impacted by the 3.5% surcharge, you have to be in the top 1% of individual wealthiest Arizonans, which means you have to be having take-home taxable income above those thresholds. So if you're an individual who's reporting on your individual income tax that you have, if you're a married person, more than $500,000 a year in taxable income, you're fortunate enough to be in the top 1% of the wealthiest Arizonans. There's been reports about this economic crisis that the people who are in the top 1% are actually faring better in this economic crisis than the lower 99%. And I want to just give some perspective, because we keep hearing that this will give Arizona one of the highest tax rates. It's going to more than double people's taxes, and that's simply not true. Arizona will still have a lower effective tax rate than the national average and will still be lower than most of the other states. And one example, a married couple in Arizona that has $650,000 in taxable income will still pay less state income taxes in Arizona than they will in 34 other states if Proposition 208 passes. That is not giving us one of the highest income taxes in the country. It's still going to be below the corporate rate. It's a lot of this, again, is the sky is falling information that's coming out there. Businesses are not going to leave with a tax rate that is still very competitive with most of the rest of the country.
Jaime, go ahead.
Luigi, that's one thing I can agree with David on. Businesses aren't going to leave, but they're not going to come here either. And capital is going to leave Arizona. That's what's going to happen. This notion that you try and obfuscate the argument that this is not going to hit small businesses is just been refuted time and time again. If you go to noprop208az.com, we have all kinds of resources and testimonials and information where people can judge for themselves of what kind of data is being offered by the No campaign versus what kind of misstatements are being given by the Yes campaign. Right now, Arizona is seeing, you asked a question about the pandemic. The tourism industry, which we do a lot of work for, is down about 60%, about $1 billion has been lost in the tourism industry. The Arizona Lodging and Tourism Association is one of our active members saying, if this passes, I guarantee you, our members are telling us there's no way they're going to come back. They're not going to reopen their doors. They're not going to have jobs for the people that may not be paying the tax, but they're impacted by the tax because they're employed by somebody that's giving them those kinds of jobs. That's why, Luigi, when we do these kinds of massive tax policies, there has to be a discussion. There has to be give and take, as Ms. Osborne talked about earlier. By being just shoved down and paying $4.2 million to get this signatures collected and shoving it down our throats is just a bad way of doing business. And particularly because with Arizona's Prop 105, the voter protection, this will be in place forever. So as I mentioned earlier, you're going to have the inflation rate continue to have more and more businesses and Arizonans be put into this tax category. We can never change that. I'll give you one example. In 2000, when we did Prop 301, a person that would make $160,000 at that time, and if you go 20 years later, if this were to be put in place, they'd be making, just with inflationary increases, they'd be about $255,000. Now they're in real dollars, they're at a much lower rate, but they're going to be inside this nefarious tax. That's why we need to make sure that when we structure something that doesn't hurt our economy, but to your point, also, when you're going to make these kinds of investments, let's talk about how this is going to help kids be at grade level reading by the 3rd grade, how kids are not going to need remedial courses if they go into higher education. That's the kind of accountability that Arizonans deserve. And that's the reason why when you raise taxes on Arizonans and businesses, you need to have those kinds of answers.
David, I want to get your reaction, sir.
Yeah, well, we have metrics that were created. It's the Arizona Edge Progress Meter that business leaders, government leaders, education leaders have come together to set what are the metrics that we want to achieve going forward. And that was, established by Expect More Arizona, who have endorsed Proposition 208, by the way. And if there's a lot of solutions that have been put forward to increase educational attainment, a lot of good solutions, but most of those require schools to have more resources. And I just want to say, I view Prop 208, and I think a lot of people do, as a job creation act. And that is because we are going to be investing in our future job creators, and that's the students of Arizona. If we've learned one thing from the COVID pandemic, it's that everyday Arizonans are the job creators. When people are not going out to restaurants, not buying things in stores, that's hurting our economy. And one of the best things you can do to increase wages, increase people having more money in their pockets, is to increase educational attainment. That's the future we want for Arizona, is to invest in our future, invest in our students. And that's what Prop 208 does.
Luigi, may I say something?
Go ahead, ma'am, just real quick.
Thank you. You know, David, I truly agree with you on some of the aspects of the proposition that need to be addressed. And the Teachers Academy, you know, we want to incentivize getting college kids to want to become teachers. I agree with that. And the legislature was putting money towards the Teachers Academy. The fourth year CTE, you know, having freshmen starting with CTE, we were putting money towards that. Another great example of getting our children ready for careers. I agree with new building capital needs to have more funding. This does not address that. When you said about some of the aha moments that COVID's brought, I went on a listening tour of I tried to hit every superintendent of every school district within my district, from Goodyear to Wickenburg to Yuma. So many of our superintendents had to use a ton of money on hotspots. This proposition will not help us put infrastructure in the ground for broadband. You know, we do need money for special ed. I want money for full day kindergarten. This I don't think can address that. I want money for early childhood education, because if half of our third graders can't read at third grade, it's got to start earlier than that, doesn't it? We don't want to keep kicking that can down the road where the gap gets wider and wider for our children. So there's so many things I know we can agree upon that we come together to solve this. But Prop 208 doesn't do that, because some of the things that I just spoke of don't come in here.
So
And
yeah,
we want measurables and accountability to come when we say, you guys pay for this. They should expect those kind of measurables and accountability that you do not see in this proposition.
David, you want to respond just real quick?
Yeah, well, I agree. There's a lot of needs. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a lot of the pressure off of our school leaders, our school superintendents. School superintendents and principals for years now having to make the difficult decisions of, do they fix the brakes on the school bus? Do they fix the leaky roof in the school building? Or do they hire or keep the classroom aide, which is so important to school learning? Those are the difficult decisions. This doesn't address everything, but it helps schools. It takes some of that pressure off, that hopefully they can then use some of those funds for other things. But you're exactly right. It's why it's going to be up to legislators like you to continue to advocate for more investments in public education.
We only have about,
Well,
so Jaime, just real quick, yeah.
so basically this comes down to, and David's comments point this out, you know, this comes down to a philosophy that wealth redistribution is the way to solve all of our problems. It's a very much of a Bernie Sanders-esque proposal, because when you look at this, it has zero accountability, like the representative talked about. It targets those individuals that they believe purport to be wealthy, when we know that there's many of whom are small businesses, and we can demonstrate that. And one of the things that we have to look at, as complex as school finance is, you're still going to have massive issues because of the way we structure our school finance system. We're going to be back, if this were to pass, and we're going to do everything we can to beat it, we would still have to come back next year or the following year to deal with the income inequities that are apparent within our school finance system. That's the thing that needs to be addressed. And one of the things that's been talked about is that, well, nobody did anything. Well, when you had representatives, Michelle Udall, the chairman of the House Education Committee, Celia Allen, chairwoman of the Senate Education Committee, propose an increase to the Prop 301 tax. David's organization and the AEA came out summarily and said, no, we're not going to do that. We don't even want to talk about that. So it seems to me that you cannot say that people don't want to do anything, and you're not even engaging with those kinds of businesses and policymakers that can have an impact.
So I want to go, we only have just a couple minutes, and I wish we had a couple more hours to just delve into this issue. We could fill the whole day just talking about it. But there's one question, and kind of summarizes many other questions. I want to ask this, I want to ask Dr. Vanderway about this one. So one question says, there's nothing about academic outcomes or college readiness in this proposal, nothing tied to student achievement. Do you believe this funding should be tied to accountable outcomes? And just a quick follow-up question, ma'am. There were a lot of questions about the idea, the presumption, if you will, that there are just, we're spending too much on administrative costs. If you could answer those two questions.
Well, I can honestly say that administratively, we're all pretty lean. If you look at school district funding is quite complicated, but we have to adhere to the policies. We get audited by the Arizona, auditor, and, we're pretty lean, really, from an administrative perspective. But what was your first question, Luigi?
My first question is about whether you believe that this new revenue should be tied to accountability and academic outcomes. Yes.
Right. And so just so you know, like, our kids are tested all the time. So we have academic accountability, and that's kind of our grading system. I just want to say that we have so many assessments that our kids take. I think that we need to look at another way of assessing our kids, because I don't think we adequately portray what our kids know, to be perfectly honest. We do have a third grade reading test, which is Move On When Reading, that assesses our kids. Our kids are assessed all along the way. We are held accountable with our grades all along the way. Our school is under school improvement because of our assessments. The thing that I've been hearing, and I understand economics to a point, and I understand our state as being a Flynn fellow. However, the one thing I keep hearing is college graduates. I'm looking for high school graduates. Right now, I'm trying to track my kids that are getting D's and F's right now because they're distant learning. And I'm worried that, we're going to have, let's say, a 5% decrease. I'm just pulling out a number of kids graduating from high school this year. And then next year, what's the COVID slide going to look like for my freshmen, juniors, sophomores, and seniors? And, that keeps me up at night, because if I have a community of kids in the next 5 years that aren't graduating from high school, and I'm not saying that this money will solve those problems, but it's a step in the right direction. We've been critically underfunded for so long. And so it's like, we have processes and procedures to look at academic gains, but we haven't been funded adequately, and our kids and our families of poverty deserve this, and our teachers.
Thank you, Dr. Vanderway. I want to give everybody just a chance to provide, a closing remark, if you will, just a couple seconds. Let me start with Representative Osborne.
Thank you very much. I can tell you I'm a very proud daughter of a teacher, a home ec and English teacher. I'm the mother of 2 teachers, and one is in the Valley as a CTE teacher. And I value education greatly, and I want the best for our children. I'm a teen mentor. I believe in CTE. I believe in our great state and what we are and what we can accomplish. I also am a business person, and I understand the broad base of our economy and what we need it to be. And at this time, especially in COVID, when not every industry is prospering, we need to be very careful not to mess up the great growth that we have and going forward. This, I'm so concerned we'll do that. And I don't want to risk it. I don't want to risk the education of our children. So that conversation continues on, and we need to come together. And I thank you for this panel. Luigi, I thank you for putting this on together, because I know we have the answer, but we got to work together to solve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Vanderway, just real quick, ma'am.
Investment in education is an investment in the state of Arizona. And as I said earlier, my goal in life is to look and work in areas in which I can provide assistance to the communities that I serve to have students graduate, whether it's through CTE or whether they're going into career and tech programs, whether they're going into college, but where they're able to gain mid-wage to high-wage jobs. And currently, we're producing a lot of low-wage job earners. And to me, that's not okay. And it's my duty to serve Arizona. And I think what we invest in education now will benefit us in the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you, ma'am. David?
Yeah, this is about all of the thousands of students who have gone through our public education system for the past 20 years in one of the most underfunded public education systems in the country, and making sure that no more students have to do that. And that's what Prop 208 is about. It's about investing in our students. It's about investing in our future economy. And that's why 435,000 Arizonans came together to put this on the ballot in the middle of a pandemic, because they're tired of politicians at the Capitol not dealing with the funding crisis in our schools, and they're ready to take matters into their own hands this November. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Jaime?
You know, I've been attacked by the proponents of this initiative, personally attacked, very publicly attacked. But I am very proud of the fact that I've been involved in Prop 301 that did significant improvements to Arizona's education system, the entire system, including our higher education. Prop 100, when Arizona was going through the dire Great Recession, being able to work on that significantly and help get that through. Prop 123, to be intimately involved with that, making sure that that happened to get resources into Arizona. This issue is not the solution. It is a very bad structure. By creating the top tier marginal tax rate, one of the highest in the country, it would be not a job creator, I'm sorry, but this would be a job killer. This would hurt us at a time when the pandemic is already taking its toll on Arizonans. What we need to do is structure an economic game plan that gets us back, gets Arizona working again, get the revenue into the state so that we can actually do something meaningful for K-12 education. Prop 208 is not the answer. Go to no Prop 208 AZ, read the testimonials, read the data, make up the decision for yourself, because once you know what's in it, you'll know that it's the wrong plan.
And again, I want to thank everybody for spending your morning with us. David, thank you so much. Dr. Vanderway, thank you so much. Representative Osborne, thank you so much. Jaime, thank you so much. And of course, I want to thank the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership at the Flynn Foundation for sponsoring today's Morning Scoop. To our viewers and our listeners, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.
Thank you.